Hello and welcome to Practice Intimacy. This is the place to be to learn all about love, sex, and how to have the best relationships you possibly can. My name is Jamie Lynn. I'm a marriage and family therapist in the Austin area, and what we are going to talk about today is one of my favorite subjects in the whole wide world, boundaries. Oh my goodness, boundaries! Okay. I actually do get really excited about this topic, partly because I know what a huge difference it makes in a person's life whenever they start learning this stuff. I experienced it in my own life. Practicing boundaries over the years that I have been a therapist has significantly changed my ability to take care of myself, to be in relationship in a way that feels really healthy, and not just healthy, but also just loving and open and more free because I don't have to worry as much. And then also I've witnessed tons of people do the work to really solidify their ability to set clear boundaries with themselves and with others, because we actually need to set boundaries with ourselves often. And it's really a skill. It's something you can learn, but it's not something that we really teach in our culture because we live in a culture of control where I am going to either manipulate or force you to do whatever I want you to do. This is truly the message that we receive often in our culture. It is a very unhealthy message. It is one that comes out of a self-centered way of being in the world, which is very much US culture. I live in the US, I live in Texas. Austin, thank God, not somewhere else in Texas. Whoa. Anyway, so yeah, there are 4 different kinds of boundaries. In this video, we're going to talk about 2 of them, and then in the next video, we'll talk about the other 2. But the reason I wanted to start with these 2 is because they're the foundation. If you can do these 2 boundaries well, the other types of boundaries become so much easier. If you can't do these 2 types of boundaries, it is really, really challenging to set boundaries either inside of yourself about your values and what you want to do in the world, how you want to act, how you want to be with people. And it's also really hard to set boundaries on the outside, how you're going to behave with other people, what you're willing to tolerate, what you're not willing to tolerate in relationship. But those will come next week. This week, we're covering physical boundaries and psychological boundaries. Both of them are incredibly helpful. I find that the psychological boundary is universally necessary. Every single person needs to learn this one. The physical boundary, you may or may not. Find out. As you listen to me talking about it, discover whether or not you think this would be useful for you. We're going to start with that one because that one is actually the very, very first one you should start with always, because your physical body is the most primal part of you. It is picking up information and reacting to information much faster than the psychological part of you. Our mind also reacts to the environment and has an internal way of responding to it, but our body is really the main organism. It's the main part of us that's attempting to pick up threats and deciding what we need to do in order to survive constantly. So start with the body. It's what needs attention first, and then move on to your mind. So with a physical boundary, when you start practicing this, what you'll be doing is teaching your body what it's like to move through the world with a felt sense of safety. The reality is the world is not an entirely safe place. It's just not. And sometimes that's because we do things like climb into vehicles and drive down a highway 70 miles an hour. And sometimes it's because there are people in the world who still live in the force and control model, and they would be willing to hurt others in order to get what they want. And so we're going to start with the real understanding that the world is not always a safe place. And the reality is that whenever you shore up your physical boundary, when you start working on this, whenever you start recognizing your edges and what they need in order to feel safe in the world, you will experience moving through life with greater ease. It becomes so much easier and more relaxing to move through the world whenever you have a physical boundary, because it's almost like your body can take in the moments that are safe, which for most of us, there's more moments of safety than danger. And as you can take those in more and more, your nervous system starts to learn, oh, I can find places of safety in the world. Wonderful. Let's keep doing this. Let's keep interacting. Let's keep feeling the safety that is possible. So who might need to work on a physical boundary? There are actually lots of people. The most obvious example would be anyone who has a history of physical violation, and that could be either somebody coming into your space in a way that does not feel good to you. So just having somebody who's really intrusive physically in your life, especially whenever you're little. I'm thinking about parents who always force their kid to give hugs, things like that. If you learn that your body is not for you and you have to give hugs to whoever wants them, that is not actually helping you create a healthy physical boundary. The other examples would be a little bit more triggering, so be prepared for this, but anyone who has any sort of sexual violence in their history, any sort of physical violence in their history, they will also need to really shore up the physical boundary before they can move on to the next boundaries. And then we don't talk about this often, but anyone who was raised as a boy in this culture, they're going to need a little bit of physical boundary work, because often people who are raised as boys and men, they get the message that their body is supposed to be invincible. Their body is supposed to be used for things like sports and beating other people. And so they kind of dissociate from what their body's feeling in order to do that. And so creating a physical boundary is going to be really helpful in that case too. So you might be wondering, how do I actually do this? Thankfully, this is a really simple one. So our physical boundary, it is connected to the lower part of our brain. It's connected to the brainstem, and it's connected to sensation, really like feeling that your body is safe in the present moment. And so things that you can do to create a really solid physical boundary would be to do a boundary outline. You can do it on your whole body, but I would actually suggest starting really small, just with like one finger. And when you do a boundary outline, you're just outlining the edges of your skin in a downward sweep. When we sweep down our body, it down regulates and soothes our nervous system. When we sweep up the body, it actually up regulates us, and we have more of a feeling of energy. Sometimes that energy is unpleasant. So always down the body, because that is more soothing. And what you do is you just put all of your attention inside whatever part of you you're touching, and then just find a way that feels good to you. I usually do squeezes. Some people just do like a sweep. So find whatever works for you, but just move down the body and have an internal, it can be external too, I usually do mine in my head, have an internal dialogue that sounds something like, this is my body belongs to me. And when you do that practice over and over and over again, what you're telling your brainstem is, in this moment, as I am touching my body, nothing else is touching my body. It's a way to build in neurological safety by bringing yourself more into the present moment. So often, if you have any sort of history of boundary violations, if your body has experienced people coming into your space in a way that's unsafe, then your nervous system is always on alert to pick that up. And what you're doing is you're creating disconfirming experiences so that your brain can pick up, oh no, wait, actually right now I'm okay. And the more you do this, the more you build in the neural network that says, I'm okay. I'm safe to be in this world. Boundary outline is the foundation. Start here. Even if you're somebody who's like, I've never had any boundary violations. I feel totally comfortable in my body. I feel safe moving through the world. This isn't a problem for me. Give it a try. Just see what it's like. See what it's like to do a boundary outline. Notice what happens inside of you whenever you're doing it. And if you're somebody who has a history that's a bit rough, if you're a person who's experienced intrusions and violations of your physical boundary, then know that this might be hard and that you can go as slow as you need to go. Really trust your body, listen to your body, and take the time to just be present with experiencing this particular practice. It does not need to rush. Okay, let's talk about the second one, psychological boundary. This one is my favorite. I use the psychological boundary every single day. Probably, like actively, I probably use it 20 times a day. Passively, it's just happening in the background. I use it constantly. I use this one so often because it's incredibly helpful. What a psychological boundary does is it's a gatekeeper which allows you to take in what you want to take in and keep out things that you do not want to take in. So let me give you an example. It's almost Thanksgiving, so this one's on my mind. This was a few years ago, before COVID. My mother, who is the sweetest lady, but also grew up in a time whenever body shaming was even worse than it is now. So she has a ton of body shame. We were at Thanksgiving family together. I'm putting makeup on. It's been many days of eating lots of heavy foods, and so my stomach looks bigger than normal, which is totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. But my mom, who has tons of body shame, looked at me and goes, "Your stomach used to be so small." Just like that. Your stomach used to be so small. Ugh. And so, psychological boundary, the thing that I do in my head is I ask myself, is this true? Is it not true? Is it about me? Not about me? And if either answer is no, I kick it out. And so in this example, your stomach used to be smaller. Is that true? Yeah, absolutely. That's totally true. Partly because I am a grown woman. I am not a teenager anymore. Partly because I've been eating lots of heavy foods for Thanksgiving. And also just true. Yes, I'm bigger than I used to be. So I'm going to take that in as true. Yes. Is there anything wrong with that? What I'm picking up from her is there's something wrong with that my stomach is bigger than it used to be. Absolutely not. There is nothing wrong with that. So I'm not going to let the judgment in. I'm just going to keep the judgment on the outside. It won't come in to touch my heart. Is it about me? Is her saying this actually about me as a person? Especially because I'm a really body positive person who is not interested in any sort of fat phobia at all. I don't do that in my head anymore. That's not true. Everyone does this because we grew up in a culture that does fat shaming. So it happens in my head, but I catch it because I know that that does not match my values and I think it's wrong. And so if that ever does come up and I shame myself for looking a certain way, or I shame someone else for looking a certain way, I stop it with my psychological boundary, actually. Anyway, so is it about me? No, it's really not. The reason she's saying this is because she has her own internal shame about her body, and that's her stuff. That's her pain. I don't need to let it in to touch me. That is her work to do. And if she wants to do it, I can be there to support her because, like I said, I'm an incredibly body positive person. And so I can be with her in a way that might be good modeling. But beyond that, not my journey. Let her have that. That's her stuff. And so in the end, rather than getting upset and saying something snarky or taking it in and feeling bad about the way I look, I was just like, interesting moment. I'm going to let that go. I'm not going to say anything. And I chose not to say anything because I didn't think it needed to be addressed. So that's an example of a psychological boundary. How it actually works, the thing that a psychological boundary does is it holds two pieces of information. One is respect, one is discernment. So with respect, what the psychological boundary knows is the most benevolent and respectful thing I can do is let other people have their emotional processes. I do not want to rob them of their emotional experience. And so if somebody's upset and saying something to me, I'm just going to let them keep their upset. It's not up to me to fix it for them. It's not up to me to take in their upset and make it about me, feel bad, feel like I'm doing something wrong. No, none of that. Instead, let them have their emotional process. They are working through something in this lifetime that will serve them. So let them do that. The other piece that it knows is discernment. And discernment, it's these two questions. Is it true? Is it about me? Said another way, is it true? Is it not true? Is it about me? Is it not about me? And what you'll find is there's a lot of nuance in these. Even this example I gave, there's a lot of nuance. Like, objectively, the thing that my mom said in that moment was true. The judgment underneath it, is that true? No. So you'll find that there's nuance. There's pieces you let in and there's pieces you keep out. Okay. Psychological boundary, physical boundary. It's so good. I love these. I love these so much. Please try them. See what it's like for you to start practicing these. If you want more examples, if you want more training of how to do these, because I know this is just a short video, then feel free to watch my free webinar about boundaries. I go through all the different kinds of boundaries a little bit more in depth. Also, why it's so hard to have good boundaries living in this culture, because we're not taught how to do it. And then there'll be a process where I lead you through to how to create your own psychological boundary. So definitely check out that resource. It is linked below. And let's see, is there anything else? Next week, what we'll cover are containing boundaries and executed boundaries. So stick around for that. Those are always fun for people, especially the executed, because we all are trying to do executed boundaries. They're the boundaries you set on the outside with other people. But so often we cannot do them because we don't have the 3 other boundaries that come first: the physical, the psychological, the containing. So join me next week and we will talk about that. It'll be very fun. And remember to like this video. Please leave comments. Tell me what it's like as you start practicing these. I would love to hear what your experience is like, and I will see you next week.